The rattlesnake's warning came seconds before the auctioneer's gavel struck the wooden block. But Eleanor Simmons found both sounds equally terrifying as she stood trembling on the makeshift platform in Petaluma, California, 1872. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on her exposed shoulders, while the hungry eyes of miners, ranchers, and drifters appraised her like livestock at the county fair. $500 from Mr. Higgins, the auctioneer announced, his voice carrying across the town square. Do I hear $550? Eleanor's gaze darted frantically between the leering faces of the bidders and her stepmother, Victoria, who stood beside the auctioneer with a self-satisfied smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. Just 3 weeks after her father's funeral, and here she stood, being sold to the highest bidder like a prized mare. $550 from Mr. Johnson. The auctioneer pointed to a pot-bellied man with tobacco-stained teeth who licked his lips as he stared at Eleanor's slender figure. The crowd had swelled as word spread throughout Petaluma that Victoria Simmons was auctioning off her 19-year-old stepdaughter in marriage. Some townsfolk looked on with disapproval, others with morbid curiosity, but none stepped forward to stop the proceedings. 600. Called out a gruff voice from the back. Eleanor's heart sank further. $600, the price of her freedom, her dreams, her very life. She fought back tears, refusing to give her stepmother the satisfaction of seeing her break. The money would pay off her father's debts, Victoria had explained with cold practicality, and rid her of the burden of an unwanted stepdaughter in one tidy transaction. $650, shouted Johnson, his meaty fist punching the air. $700, countered the voice from the back. The crowd parted as a tall figure moved forward. Eleanor caught her first glimpse of the stranger, a lean cowboy with dust-covered clothes and a weathered hat pulled low over his face. His spurs clinked softly as he approached the platform, and when he lifted his gaze to meet hers, Eleanor was startled by eyes the color of a summer storm. $700 from the stranger, the auctioneer announced, looking to Johnson for a counter-offer. $750. Johnson spat, his face reddening with determination. The cowboy didn't hesitate. $800. Johnson's eyes narrowed. $850, $1,000, the cowboy said calmly, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. $1,000 was a small fortune in these parts, enough to buy a decent parcel of land or a fine herd of cattle. $1,000 going once. The auctioneer called, his eyes wide with surprise. Johnson shook his head in defeat, muttering curses under his breath. Going twice. Victoria's smile widened as she calculated her windfall. Sold. To the gentleman in the back. The cowboy approached the platform, drawing a leather pouch from his vest. He counted out the money methodically while Eleanor stood frozen, uncertain if her fate had improved or worsened. At least Johnson's lecherous gaze had been familiar, the devil she knew. This stranger represented an uncertain future, and uncertainty was dangerous in the West. As Victoria eagerly gathered up the money, the cowboy extended his hand to help Eleanor down from the platform. His touch was surprisingly gentle. Liam Sullivan, he introduced himself quietly, tipping his hat. And I believe you must be Miss Eleanor. Eleanor nodded mutely, trying to read his intentions in those storm-gray eyes. Well, Miss Eleanor, he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. I didn't pay good money for a wife only to have her faint from heat stroke before we've even been properly introduced. Let's get you someplace cooler. With a firm hand at her elbow, he guided her away from the platform and the dispersing crowd. Eleanor's legs moved mechanically, her mind still struggling to process her new reality. Where are you taking me? She finally managed to ask when they'd put some distance between themselves and the auction. Liam glanced down at her, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. That depends entirely on you, Miss Eleanor. Eleanor stopped abruptly, confusion furrowing her brow. What do you mean? I mean that I didn't buy you to own you, Liam said, his voice low and steady. I bought you to give you a choice. Eleanor stared at him, disbelief warring with a fragile spark of hope. A choice? Yes, madam. You can marry me if that's what you want, though I wouldn't recommend it seeing as we've only just met. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Or I can escort you to the stagecoach station with enough money for a ticket to San Francisco or Sacramento, anywhere you'd like to go. Or I can set you up with a room at the hotel and some funds while you figure out what you want to do next." Eleanor's legs suddenly felt weak and she swayed slightly. Liam's hand immediately moved to support her elbow. "Why?" she whispered, searching his face for any sign of deception. "Why would you do this?" Liam's expression darkened momentarily. "Let's just say I've seen what happens to women with no choices in this world. No one should be sold like cattle, Miss Eleanor. Especially not someone who looks like they've got a fire in their soul." For the first time since her father's death, Eleanor felt something other than grief and fear. It wasn't quite hope she'd learned to be wary of that, but perhaps it was the distant cousin of hope, possibility. "I don't understand," she said, her voice stronger now. "You spent $1,000 just to set me free. Consider it an investment in making the world a slightly less terrible place," Liam replied with a small shrug. "Now, what'll it be? The stagecoach leaves in an hour if you're wanting to put Petaluma behind you." Eleanor's mind raced. She had no family left, no friends close enough to help. San Francisco was a big city where a young woman alone might find work, but also dangers. And this stranger, this man who'd spent a fortune apparently just to give her freedom, who was he really? "I need time," she finally said. "To think." Liam nodded as if he'd expected this answer. "The hotel it is, then, for now." They walked in silence toward the Petaluma Hotel, a two-story building that represented the town's growing prosperity. Eleanor was acutely aware of the stairs following them by tomorrow. The entire town would be buzzing with speculation about the cowboy, who'd paid a king's ransom for Victoria Simmons' stepdaughter. As they approached the hotel entrance, Eleanor glanced back toward the town square where her life had been auctioned away. She caught sight of her stepmother counting her money outside the general store, not even sparing a thought for the stepdaughter she'd just sold. "She won't let this go so easily," Eleanor murmured, more to herself than to Liam. Liam's gaze followed hers. "Your stepmother," Eleanor nodded. "Victoria never does anything without a plan. She wanted me gone, yes, but she also wanted to humiliate me." "She won't like that. You've given me options she didn't account for." "Let me worry about your stepmother," Liam said, his voice suddenly hard as iron. "You just focus on deciding what you want your next chapter to look like." Inside the hotel, Liam arranged for a room for Eleanor and paid for a week in advance. He also ordered a hot meal to be sent up, along with bath water. "I'll be staying down the hall," he informed her as the hotel clerk handed her a key. "Take all the time you need to rest and think." "I won't rush you for a decision. Mr. Sullivan," Eleanor said, stopping him as he turned to go, "I still don't understand why you're helping me, but thank you." Something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of old pain, perhaps before he nodded once and walked away, spurs jingling with each step. Alone in her room, Eleanor sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. Just that morning, she had awakened in her childhood home, knowing it would likely be for the last time, but never imagining the public humiliation Victoria had planned. Now she sat in a hotel room, her fate temporarily her own to decide. She moved to the window and looked out at Petaluma. The town had grown rapidly since gold was discovered in California. What had once been a small trading post was now a bustling community with a bank, several stores, saloons, and even a small theater. Her father had moved them here 5 years ago, hoping to make his fortune. Instead, he'd found only moderate success before illness took him, leaving debts that Victoria clearly had no intention of paying herself. As the sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, Eleanor made a decision. She would not run. Not yet, at least. First, she needed to understand the mysterious cowboy who had purchased her freedom at such a high price. No one did something like that without a reason, and Eleanor was determined to discover what Liam Sullivan's real motives were. The next morning, Eleanor awoke to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of her hotel room. For a disorienting moment, she expected to hear Victoria's sharp voice calling her to prepare breakfast. Then reality flooded back the auction, the cowboy, her precarious freedom. She dressed quickly in the same blue dress she'd worn yesterday, the only clothing she had with her. Victoria hadn't allowed her to pack before marching her to the town square. After splashing water on her face and pinning up her chestnut hair as neatly as possible, Eleanor ventured downstairs. Liam Sullivan was already in the hotel dining room, nursing a cup of coffee and reading a newspaper. He rose immediately when she entered, pulling out a chair for her at his table. "Good morning, Miss Eleanor," he greeted her. "I trust you slept well." "As well as could be expected," she replied honestly, studying him in the morning light. He looked different than he had yesterday, cleaner, more polished. His dark hair was neatly combed, his face freshly shaved, revealing a strong jawline. Without trail dust covering him, she could see that his clothes were of good quality, though not flashy. Not the typical drifting cowboy, then. "I've ordered breakfast," he said, gesturing to the place setting across from him. "I hope you don't mind." As if on cue, a waitress appeared with plates of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. Eleanor suddenly realized how hungry she was. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, anxiety having stolen her appetite before the auction. "Thank you," she said, both to Liam and the waitress, before turning her attention to the food. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Eleanor gathered her courage. "Mr. Sullivan, while I appreciate your generosity, I feel I'm owed an explanation. No one spends $1,000 on a stranger without reason." Liam set down his coffee cup and met her gaze directly. "That's fair enough." He glanced around the dining room, which was beginning to fill with other hotel guests. "But perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private. Would you care to take a walk after breakfast?" Eleanor nodded, her curiosity only growing stronger. She finished her meal quickly, and soon they were strolling down Petaluma's main street, maintaining a respectable distance between them. Several townsfolk stared openly, and Eleanor held her head high, refusing to show shame for a situation that had been forced upon her. "I came to Petaluma tracking a man," Liam began without preamble when they reached a quieter stretch of road. "A man who has done considerable harm to many people, including my family." "You're a bounty hunter?" Eleanor asked, surprise coloring her voice. "Sometimes," Liam admitted. "Though my primary business is ranching, I own land about 2 days' ride north of here." "And this man you're tracking works for your stepmother," Liam finished for her. "Or at least he did until recently." Eleanor stopped walking. "What? Who?" "A man named Raymond Blackwell, mean as a rattlesnake and twice as deadly." "He was your father's foreman for the last year or so, wasn't he?" Eleanor nodded slowly, memories flooding back. "Yes, my father hired him to oversee the men working our land. He left shortly after my father died." "Convenient timing," Liam commented grimly. "Blackwell has been working his way through California for years, finding wealthy men with businesses to run, ingratiating himself, and then arranging accidents. Are you saying?" Eleanor's voice faltered as the implication hit her. "My father's illness may not have been natural," Liam confirmed gently. "I can't say for certain in your father's case, but Blackwell has a pattern, and your stepmother fits another pattern, the newer, younger wife who stands to inherit everything." Eleanor's legs threatened to give way beneath her, and Liam quickly guided her to a bench outside the barber shop. "I'm sorry," he said, genuine remorse in his eyes. "I shouldn't have been so blunt." "No," Eleanor said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I needed to know." She took a deep breath. "But this doesn't explain why you bought me at the auction." Liam ran a hand through his hair. "I arrived in town yesterday, asking questions about Blackwell. When I heard about the auction, I couldn't just stand by, and I thought perhaps you might have information that could help me find him." "So it wasn't altruism after all," Eleanor said, a note of bitterness creeping into her voice. "You want something from me too?" "Not entirely," Liam admitted. "Yes, I hope you can help me find Blackwell, but I meant what I said. You have choices. I would have intervened regardless." Eleanor studied his face, searching for deception but finding only earnestness. "What exactly do you think I know? Anything about Blackwell's plans or destination? Any conversations you might have overheard between him and your stepmother? Any papers or correspondence you might have seen?" Eleanor thought back to the weeks before and after her father's death. "Blackwell and Victoria did speak privately often, I thought." She hesitated. "I thought perhaps they were having an affair. Father was bedridden for months before he passed." Liam nodded grimly. It wouldn't be the first time Blackwell used that approach. The night after the funeral, I heard them arguing, Eleanor continued, the memory coming into focus now. Victoria was demanding something money, I think, and Blackwell told her she'd get her share after he settled accounts in Sacramento. He left the next morning. Sacramento, Liam murmured. That fits with other information I've gathered. What did this man do to your family? Eleanor asked quietly. A shadow passed over Liam's face. My younger brother was married to a woman named Catherine, wealthy family, timber business in Oregon. Blackwell worked for her father, became his trusted advisor. My brother grew suspicious of some financial irregularities, started asking questions. A week later, he died in a hunting accident. I'm so sorry, Eleanor said softly. Catherine was with child when it happened, Liam continued, his voice rough with emotion. She lost the baby from the shock. 6 months later, her father died suddenly, heart failure, they said. Blackwell vanished with a significant portion of the family fortune. By the time I pieced it all together, he had a 3-month head start. Eleanor's mind was reeling with this new information. If what Liam suggested was true, Victoria might have conspired with Blackwell to kill her father. The thought made her physically ill. If I help you find this man, she said slowly, what happens to Victoria? That depends on what evidence we find, Liam replied honestly. If she was complicit in your father's death, she'll face justice. If not, she sold me, Eleanor said, her voice hardening. Even if she didn't kill my father, she didn't waste any time getting rid of me once he was gone. The choice is still yours, Miss Eleanor, Liam reminded her. You can take the money and the stagecoach ticket I offered. Start fresh somewhere else. Eleanor considered this option. It was tempting to simply walk away from Petaluma and all its painful memories. But something inside her rebelled at the thought of Victoria and Blackwell potentially getting away with murder. I want to help you, she decided. But first, I need to return to my father's house. If there's evidence to be found, it would be there. It's dangerous, Liam warned. Your stepmother will be at her weekly ladies' society meeting this afternoon, Eleanor interrupted. She never misses it. It's her chance to pretend she's a respectable widow rather than the scheming opportunist she truly is. A reluctant smile tugged at Liam's lips. You have spirit, Miss Eleanor, I'll give you that. My father always said I was too headstrong for my own good, she replied, a pang of grief hitting her anew at the memory. Sometimes being headstrong is the only way to survive, Liam said quietly. All right then. We'll go to your father's house this afternoon, but we'll need to be careful if Victoria is involved with Blackwell. She's more dangerous than she appears. Eleanor nodded, determination replacing her earlier shock. 2 o'clock. She'll leave at 1:30 for her meeting and won't return until at least 4. As they walked back toward the hotel, Eleanor felt a strange sense of purpose, replacing the helplessness that had consumed her for weeks. Perhaps helping Liam find her father's murderer wasn't the fresh start she'd imagined for herself, but it felt right. It felt like justice. What she didn't yet understand was why her heart beat a little faster every time Liam Sullivan's storm gray eyes met hers. That complication was one she'd have to examine another time. At precisely 1:45 that afternoon, Eleanor and Liam approached the Simmons house from the back alley. It was a substantial 2-story home on the north side of Petaluma, reflecting Edmund Simmons' status as one of the town's more prosperous merchants. Eleanor felt a twist of sorrow as she looked at the place she'd called home for the past 5 years. Once filled with her father's hearty laughter and warm presence, it now felt like a mausoleum. The back door, she whispered to Liam, leading him to a kitchen entrance partially hidden by climbing roses. Martha, our housekeeper, always leaves by one. She won't return until evening to prepare dinner. Eleanor reached under a loose board by the step and retrieved a key. Father always kept a spare here. Victoria doesn't know about it. As she unlocked the door, Eleanor half expected to feel like an intruder in her own home, but instead, a strange calm settled over her. This house contained the last 5 years of her life, her father's final days, and possibly the truth about his death. They entered the kitchen quietly, and Eleanor paused to listen for any sounds in the house. Hearing nothing, she gestured for Liam to follow her. Where should we start? he asked, his voice low. Father's study, Eleanor replied without hesitation. If there's any evidence of what Blackwell was up to, it would be there. Father kept all his business records and correspondence in his desk. They moved through the house silently. Eleanor led them up the main staircase to the second floor, wincing when a floorboard creaked beneath her weight. Her father's study was at the end of the hallway, a room that had once been her favorite place in the house. She'd spent countless evenings there as a child, reading books from his shelves while he worked at his desk. The door was locked, something that immediately struck Eleanor as odd. "Victoria's been keeping it locked," she murmured. "Father never locked this door." "Can you pick locks as well as find hidden keys?" Liam asked with a raised eyebrow. "Better," Eleanor replied, reaching up to the molding above the door and feeling along it until her fingers found what they sought. Father always forgot his keys. The study was exactly as Eleanor remembered it, though a thin layer of dust covered the surfaces, suggesting Victoria hadn't spent much time there. Leather-bound books lined the walls, a large mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, and her father's favorite leather armchair sat by the window overlooking the garden below. "Where would your father have kept important documents?" Liam asked, already moving toward the desk. "The bottom right drawer has a false bottom," Eleanor said, crossing to the desk. "He showed me once when I was younger." The drawer was locked, but Eleanor quickly found the key in the inkwell on the desk, another of her father's hiding places. Inside were stacks of papers, deeds, contracts, letters, and ledgers. Eleanor and Liam began carefully going through them, searching for anything related to Blackwell. "Here," Liam said after several minutes, holding up a leather-bound ledger. "Your father's business accounts." They pored over the pages together, heads bent close. Eleanor was acutely aware of Liam's proximity, the clean scent of soap and leather that surrounded him, but she forced herself to focus on the task at hand. "Look at these entries," she said, pointing to a series of transactions. "Large withdrawals, all authorized by Blackwell. Father always handled major expenditures himself." Liam nodded grimly. "And these dates coincide with your father's illness growing worse." "Yes," Eleanor confirmed, a cold feeling spreading through her. "He became bedridden in February, and these withdrawals start in March." Where was the money going? Liam wondered aloud, flipping through more pages. Eleanor reached for another ledger. "This is the household accounts," she explained. "I helped Father keep them before he married Victoria." As she scanned the entries, her frown deepened. "These don't match up." Victoria claimed she was spending enormous sums on doctors and medicines for Father, but the household accounts show only minimal medical expenses. So where did all that money go? Liam muttered, continuing to search through the papers. Eleanor opened the next ledger and gasped. "Liam, look at this." It was a personal journal, her father's handwriting growing increasingly shaky in the later entries. Eleanor's hands trembled as she read, "April 10, 1872, I fear V. May not have my best interests at heart. Blackwell suggested a new tonic today, insisting it would strengthen me, but it leaves me weaker than before. My thoughts grow muddled after I take it. When I suggested stopping, both were adamant I continue. Eleanor seemed concerned when she visited, but V. rarely allows her time alone with me now. April 15, 1872 asked Dr. Miller about the tonic when V left the room. He knew nothing of it. His expression troubled me greatly. He took a sample for testing. I've stopped drinking it, though I must pretend when they bring it, growing stronger already. April 18, 1872, Dr. Miller returned. The tonic contains arsenic, small doses gradually increasing. Cannot confront V, yet too weak, must protect Eleanor. Changed will today when V was at her social gathering. All to Eleanor now, except widow's portion required by law, Miller witnessed. God help me, I married a monster. The final entry, dated April 20, was nearly illegible, the handwriting badly distorted. Eleanor must know, Blackwell and V, planning something, overheard them. After I'm gone, Eleanor in danger. Sacramento connection, man named Hayes. Evidence in safe behind painting. Combination is Eleanor's birth. The entry ended abruptly. April 20 was the day her father died. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. They killed him, she whispered. They poisoned him slowly, and when he discovered it. Liam's hand covered hers briefly, a gesture of comfort that felt unexpectedly right. "We need to find that safe," he said gently. What painting was he referring to? Eleanor wiped her eyes, determination replacing grief. "The portrait of my mother," she said, crossing to the large painting hanging beside the bookcase. Together they lifted the heavy portrait from the wall, revealing a small wall safe behind it. Eleanor stared at the dial, her mind racing. "My birthday," she murmured. "August 17, 1853. She tried several combinations. 8-17-53, 17-8-53, then finally 8-17-5-3, turning each number deliberately. With the last number, the safe mechanism clicked, and the door swung open. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed to Eleanor in her father's handwriting, a stack of documents, and a small leather pouch. Eleanor's hands shook as she opened the envelope and read the letter inside. "My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then my suspicions proved correct, and I have not survived Victoria and Blackwell's scheme. Forgive me for not seeing Victoria's true nature before I brought her into our lives. I was lonely after so many years without your mother, and Victoria's attentions blinded me to her greed. The documents enclosed prove that Blackwell has been systematically embezzling from our business, with Victoria's knowledge and cooperation. I believe they have done this before, to other families. A man named Joseph Hayes in Sacramento was apparently their previous victim. His name appears in correspondence I found in Blackwell's desk. There is also evidence that Blackwell has been operating under multiple names, including Raymond Wells and Robert Black. The pouch contains enough money for you to leave Petaluma and start fresh somewhere safe. Know that I love you beyond measure, my darling daughter, and my greatest regret is leaving you to face this alone. Be brave, but be cautious. These people are dangerous with eternal love." Your father, Eleanor, clutched the letter to her chest, tears flowing freely now. Liam stood silently beside her, giving her this moment of grief. "He knew," she finally said. "He knew, and he tried to protect me even when he was dying." "He was a brave man," Liam said softly, "and you are very much his daughter." Eleanor carefully folded the letter and turned to the documents. As her father had written, they contained evidence of Blackwell's embezzlement, along with letters between Victoria and Blackwell that made their relationship and conspiracy clear. "This is enough to bring to the sheriff," Liam said, examining the papers. "And it gives me a solid lead on Blackwell Sacramento and this man Hayes." Eleanor was about to respond when they heard the front door open downstairs. They froze, exchanging alarmed glances. "Victoria," Eleanor whispered. "She's back early." Footsteps sounded on the stairs. There was no time to replace everything and no way to leave the study without being seen. Liam quickly gathered the most incriminating documents and stuffed them inside his jacket. "If she finds us here," Eleanor began. "Trust me," Liam interrupted, guiding her to the armchair by the window. He positioned himself beside her, one hand resting on the chair's back in a casually intimate pose. The study door swung open, and Victoria Simmons stood framed in the doorway, her expression shifting from surprise to outrage. "What are you doing in my house?" she demanded, her cold eyes moving from Eleanor to Liam. "Ah, Mrs. Simmons," Liam said smoothly, tipping his hat. "I was hoping to meet you. I'm Liam Sullivan, your stepdaughter's. Well, I suppose I'm her owner now, aren't I? Though I prefer the term fiancé." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "Fiancé. I sold her to you as a bride, Mr. Sullivan. There was no condition requiring her consent." "True," Liam replied with a disarming smile. "But I'm a traditional man. I wanted to bring Eleanor back to her childhood home to properly propose. I thought it only fitting she have something familiar around her for such an important moment." Eleanor fought to keep her expression neutral, following Liam's lead. "Yes, stepmother, Mr. Sullivan has been most considerate." Victoria's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "How did you get in here?" "And into this room. It's kept locked." "I had my key," Eleanor said, keeping her voice steady. "Father gave it to me years ago, and as for why we're in his study, I wanted to show Liam father's portrait of mother. I have so little to remember her by." Victoria's gaze moved to the portrait, which they had hastily rehung, slightly askew. If she noticed the discrepancy, she gave no sign. "Well, you've seen it now," Victoria said coldly. And as touching as this little scene is, this house is no longer your home, Eleanor. You were sold fairly, and Mr. Sullivan's money is now mine, as is everything else in this house. Actually, Liam interjected pleasantly, I've been meaning to discuss that with you. Eleanor has mentioned some personal items she'd like to take with her mementos of her parents, some clothing, books. Surely you wouldn't begrudge her those small comforts, Victoria's mouth tightened. The transaction is complete, Mr. Sullivan. What you do with your purchase is your affair, but nothing leaves this house without my permission. I see, Liam said, his tone hardening slightly. That seems rather harsh, Mrs. Simmons, almost as if you bear your stepdaughter some ill will. My feelings toward Eleanor are not your concern, Victoria replied. Now I must ask you both to leave. I have guests arriving shortly. Of course, Liam agreed smoothly, offering his arm to Eleanor. We wouldn't want to impose. As they moved toward the door, Victoria stepped aside, her sharp gaze following them. Eleanor forced herself not to look back at the study, at the safe that now stood empty behind her mother's portrait. Everything they needed was either in Liam's jacket or in Eleanor's heart. They descended the stairs in silence, Victoria following a few steps behind. At the front door, Eleanor paused, her eyes taking in the entryway of her father's house one last time. Goodbye, stepmother, she said, injecting as much sweetness into her voice as she could manage. I do hope we'll meet again someday. Victoria's answering smile was cold. I rather doubt that, Eleanor. Mr. Sullivan looks like a man who'll keep his woman far from civilization. Do enjoy your new life in whatever backwater he calls home. Liam's hand tightened on Eleanor's arm, but his expression remained pleasantly neutral. Good day, Mrs. Simmons. I'm sure our paths will cross again sooner than you might expect. Outside, they maintained their composed facade until they were well away from the house, turning down a side street before Liam finally spoke. We need to go to the sheriff immediately, he said, his voice urgent. With your father's letter and these documents, there's enough evidence to arrest Victoria. And Blackwell, Eleanor asked. The sheriff can wire the authorities in Sacramento. With what we know now, they can be on the lookout for him. As they hurried toward the sheriff's office, Eleanor felt as though she were walking in a dream. In the space of 24 hours, she had been sold at auction, rescued by a mysterious cowboy, and discovered the truth about her father's death. It was almost too much to comprehend. Liam, she said suddenly, stopping in the middle of the street, I never thanked you properly, for the auction, for helping me find the truth, for everything. Liam's expression softened as he looked down at her. You don't need to thank me, Eleanor. Your father was right, you're brave. You would have found your way without me. Perhaps, she conceded, but I'm glad I didn't have to. Something shifted in his gaze, a warmth that made Eleanor's heart beat faster. For a moment she thought he might say more, but instead he gently touched her elbow. Come on, he said softly. Let's see justice done for your father. Sheriff Collins listened to their story with increasing concern, examining the documents they presented with careful attention. A weathered man in his 50s with a reputation for fairness, he had known Edmund Simmons well and seemed genuinely disturbed by the evidence of Victoria's betrayal. This is serious business, he said finally, setting down Edmund's letter. Poisoning, embezzlement, fraud. I've got more than enough here to arrest Victoria Simmons. And Blackwell, Liam pressed. I'll wire Sacramento immediately, the sheriff promised. With this description and the aliases you've provided, they stand a good chance of apprehending him if he's still in the area. He stood, reaching for his hat and gun belt. I'll head over to the Simmons place now. Miss Eleanor, you might want to wait here. This won't be pleasant. Eleanor shook her head firmly. My father was murdered in that house, Sheriff. I won't hide while justice is served. The sheriff nodded, respecting her decision. Mr. Sullivan, I'd be obliged if you'd accompany us. These situations can be unpredictable. Within the hour, a small group consisting of the sheriff, his deputy, Liam, and Eleanor approached the Simmons house. The confrontation that followed was both dramatic and anticlimactic. Victoria initially denied everything, her composure cracking only when presented with her own letters to Blackwell. She then attempted to flee through the kitchen, but was intercepted by the deputy. As Victoria was led away in handcuffs, her venomous gaze fixed on Eleanor. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "Raymond has friends in high places. This changes nothing." "It changes everything," Eleanor replied steadily. "My father can rest in peace now." The sheriff allowed Eleanor to gather some personal belongings from the house: clothing, jewelry, and books that had belonged to her parents. As she placed a silver-framed photograph of her father in a carpet bag, a sense of closure began to settle over her. Outside, Liam waited patiently, holding the reins of his horse. "The sheriff says they'll hold the trial in 2 weeks," he informed her. "He's confident of a conviction with the evidence we have." Eleanor nodded, suddenly aware of a new uncertainty looming before her. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "That depends on you," Liam replied. "I meant what I said yesterday. You have choices." Eleanor studied his face in the late afternoon sunlight. There was something about Liam Sullivan that drew her to him: a quiet strength, an unwavering sense of justice, and a gentleness that belied his rugged exterior. "You're still going after Blackwell," she stated rather than asked. "I have to," he confirmed. "Not just for your father now, but for my brother, for Catherine, and for who knows how many others." "Then I'm coming with you," Eleanor decided, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Liam's eyebrows rose. "To Sacramento, Eleanor, it could be dangerous." "I'm already in danger," she pointed out. "Victoria's threat wasn't empty. If Blackwell has connections, he'll learn I helped bring her down. Besides, I know his face, his mannerisms. I could identify him where you might not." Liam looked as though he wanted to argue, but instead he sighed, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. "You're as stubborn as you are brave, aren't you?" "So my father always said," Eleanor replied with a small smile of her own. "The stage to Sacramento leaves tomorrow morning," Liam said after a moment's consideration. "If you're truly determined to do this." "I am," Eleanor confirmed. "Then we'd better get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." As they walked back toward the hotel, Eleanor felt a strange mixture of emotions: grief for her father, satisfaction that Victoria would face justice, apprehension about pursuing Blackwell, and something else, something warmer that stirred whenever Liam's hand brushed hers as they walked side by side. Tomorrow would indeed be a new day, the beginning of a journey she could never have imagined, when she stood trembling on that auction platform just 24 hours ago. The stagecoach to Sacramento lurched over a particularly deep rut, sending Eleanor sliding across the leather seat until her shoulder pressed against Liam's. She straightened quickly, muttering an apology, but not before noticing the slight smile that touched his lips. They had been traveling for hours, the morning sunshine giving way to the heat of midday as the coach made its way through the California countryside. 2 other passengers shared the coach: an elderly minister dozing in the corner, and a nervous-looking young man who had introduced himself as a bank clerk on his way to visit family. Eleanor gazed out the window at the rolling hills, her mind replaying the events of the past 2 days. Before leaving Petaluma that morning, Sheriff Collins had informed them that Victoria was being remarkably forthcoming, perhaps hoping for leniency. She had confirmed that Blackwell was indeed headed to Sacramento to meet with a business associate, a man named Hayes, who apparently helped Blackwell and Victoria launder the money from their various schemes. "Are you all right?" Liam asked quietly, breaking into her thoughts. "You've been very quiet." Eleanor turned from the window to meet his concerned gaze. "Just thinking," she replied. "Everything has happened so quickly. 2 days ago, I thought my future was to be a lonely spinster in my father's house, watching Victoria gradually take control of everything he built. And now—" Liam prompted when she fell silent. "Now I'm on a stagecoach to Sacramento with a man I barely know, chasing a murderer," Eleanor said with a small, incredulous laugh. "If someone had told me this would be my life, I'd have thought them mad." "Life rarely follows the path we expect," Liam observed, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "My father raised me to take over our ranch one day. I never imagined I'd spend years tracking a killer across 3 states." "Tell me about your ranch," Eleanor requested, genuinely curious about this man who had so dramatically altered her fate. A warmth entered Liam's eyes that she hadn't seen before. It's good land, about 100 miles north of Sacramento, not as large as some, but productive. My father started with 20 acres and a dozen cattle. Now we have over 500 acres and a respectable herd. You speak of it with love, Eleanor noted. It's home, Liam said simply. I've been away too long. My foreman, Thomas, has been managing things in my absence, but… You miss it, Eleanor finished for him when he trailed off. Very much, he admitted. When this business with Blackwell is finished, I'll be glad to return. Eleanor nodded, a strange pang in her chest at the thought of Liam returning to his ranch without her. Which was ridiculous, she chided herself. They were temporary allies, nothing more. And what about you? Liam asked. What would you do if you could choose any future for yourself? It was a question Eleanor hadn't allowed herself to consider in a long time. During her father's illness and after his death, survival had been her only concern. I'd like to teach, I think, she said after a moment's reflection. I've always loved books and learning. Father made sure I received a good education, even when his friends thought it unnecessary for a girl. You'd make an excellent teacher, Liam said with conviction. You have patience and determination, both essential qualities for anyone hoping to shape young minds. Perhaps, Eleanor replied, touched by his confidence in her, though I'm not sure where I'll settle once this is over. The implication hung between them that soon their paths would diverge, each returning to their separate lives. Eleanor was surprised by how much the thought bothered her. The stagecoach hit another rut, and this time it was Liam who was jostled against her. His arm pressed briefly against hers, warm and solid, before he shifted away, muttering an apology. Eleanor found herself missing the contact immediately. We should arrive in Sacramento by nightfall, Liam said, changing the subject. I know of a respectable hotel where you'll be safe while I make inquiries about Blackwell. You mean where I'll be safe while you make inquiries without me? Eleanor corrected him with a raised eyebrow. Liam's expression turned serious. Eleanor, Blackwell is dangerous. If he sees you, he'll be more likely to let his guard down, she interrupted. He knows me as Edmund Simmons' dutiful daughter. He has no reason to think I know of his crimes. It's too risky, Liam insisted. This entire endeavor is risky, Eleanor countered. But I didn't come this far to sit in a hotel room while you do all the work. I want justice for my father as much as you want it for your brother. The minister in the corner stirred at her raised voice, blinking sleepily at them before settling back into his doze. Liam leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. I promise to give you choices, Eleanor, not to put you in danger. Then give me the choice to help, she replied firmly. I'm not a child to be protected, Liam. I'm a woman who's lost everything but her determination to see justice done. Something flickered in his eyes, respect, perhaps, or admiration. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. We'll work together then, but you must promise to be careful and to follow my lead when necessary. Agreed, Eleanor said, satisfied with the compromise. So what's our plan once we reach Sacramento? Liam glanced at the other passengers before answering quietly. Victoria mentioned that Hayes works at the Sacramento Bank. We'll start there tomorrow morning. For tonight, we'll get rooms at the hotel and rest. As the afternoon wore on, the stagecoach continued its jolting journey toward Sacramento. The conversation between Eleanor and Liam turned to lighter topics: books they had read, places they had seen, memories of childhood. With each mile that passed, Eleanor felt herself growing more comfortable in Liam's company, more drawn to his quiet strength and unexpected moments of humor. By the time they reached the outskirts of Sacramento, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Eleanor gazed out at the city sprawling before them, larger and more imposing than Petaluma, with buildings of brick and stone lining wide streets busy with wagons, carriages, and pedestrians, despite the approaching evening. It's bigger than I imagined, she murmured, suddenly feeling small and unprepared for what lay ahead. Stay close to me, Liam said, his hand briefly covering hers in reassurance. Sacramento can be overwhelming at first, but it's not so different from any other city once you know your way around. The stagecoach delivered them to the station near the center of town. Liam helped Eleanor down, then retrieved their bags while she stretched her legs after the long journey. The noise and bustle of the city enveloped them, street vendors calling their wares, saloon music drifting from open doors, the constant clatter of hooves and wheels on cobblestone streets. "The Pacific Hotel is just 2 blocks from here," Liam informed her, offering his arm. "It's respectable and clean, and the owner is an old friend of my father's." As they walked through the crowded streets, Eleanor was acutely aware of Liam's protective presence beside her. He guided her expertly through the throngs of people, his hand occasionally touching the small of her back when the crowd pressed too close. Each brief contact sent a flutter through her stomach that she tried valiantly to ignore. The Pacific Hotel was an impressive 4-story building with a columned entrance and gleaming windows. Inside, a spacious lobby featured potted palms, plush furniture, and a polished reception desk where a clerk in a neat uniform greeted them. "Mr. Sullivan." The clerk exclaimed, recognition lighting his face. "It's been some time since we've had the pleasure of your company." "Hello, Phillips," Liam replied with a friendly nod. "Is Mr. Hargrove available? The owner will be delighted to see you, sir. I'll send word immediately." While they waited, Eleanor took in her surroundings with wide eyes. The hotel was the most elegant establishment she had ever entered, far grander than anything in Petaluma. A portly man with impressive whiskers soon appeared, greeting Liam with a hearty handshake. "Sullivan, my boy. What brings you to Sacramento? Not still chasing that scoundrel, I hope." "I'm afraid so, Mr. Hargrove," Liam replied. "May I present Miss Eleanor Simmons?" "Miss Simmons, this is Theodore Hargrove, proprietor of the Pacific and an old family friend." "A pleasure, Miss Simmons," Hargrove said with a courtly bow. "Any friend of Liam Sullivan is welcome at the Pacific." "Thank you, sir," Eleanor replied with a small curtsy. "Your hotel is lovely. We need 2 rooms, Theodore," Liam said, "as private as possible." Hargrove's bushy eyebrows rose slightly as his gaze moved between them, but he made no comment. "Of course, I have 2 excellent rooms on the 3rd floor at the quiet end of the hallway. Shall I have supper sent up? You both look weary from travel." "That would be most appreciated," Liam agreed. As they followed a bellboy up the grand staircase, Eleanor found herself wondering what Mr. Hargrove had made of their arrangement. A young woman traveling with a man not her husband was unusual enough to raise eyebrows, especially in better establishments. She was grateful for Liam's foresight in choosing a hotel where his connection to the owner might prevent gossip. Their rooms were indeed comfortable, spacious, and well-appointed, with large windows overlooking the city. Eleanor's room connected to Liam's through a discreet door, currently locked, with keys on both sides, a common arrangement for families traveling together. After the bellboy departed, Liam lingered in the doorway of Eleanor's room. "Get some rest," he advised. "Tomorrow we'll begin our inquiries at the bank." "Thank you," Eleanor said softly. "For everything." A shadow of something indefinable passed across Liam's face. "Don't thank me yet," he replied. "We still have to find Blackwell." "We will," Eleanor said with more confidence than she felt. "Good night, Liam." "Good night, Eleanor." After he left, Eleanor moved to the window, gazing out at the lights of Sacramento glittering like fallen stars. Somewhere in this city was the man who had murdered her father. Tomorrow they would begin hunting him in earnest. The thought should have terrified her, but with Liam by her side, she felt strangely fearless. It was that realization that her courage was somehow tied to Liam's presence that finally forced her to acknowledge what she had been trying to deny since that first moment on the auction platform. She was falling for Liam Sullivan, a man who saw her as nothing more than a temporary ally in his quest for justice. The Sacramento Bank stood imposingly on a corner of the city's financial district, its marble columns and heavy oak doors projecting an aura of solidity and trustworthiness. Eleanor and Liam paused across the street, observing the steady stream of customers entering and exiting. "Remember," Liam said quietly, "we're here to inquire about investment opportunities. You're my fiancé, and we're looking to settle in Sacramento after our wedding." Eleanor nodded, adjusting her borrowed gloves. That morning, a package had arrived from Mr. Hargrove containing a fashionable day dress, gloves, and a small hat, apparently at the request of his wife, who had been informed of Eleanor's situation. The pale blue ensemble was far finer than anything Eleanor had owned in recent years, and she felt both grateful and self-conscious in the elegant attire. "You look lovely," Liam said, as if reading her thoughts. "Every inch the prosperous fiancé." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "And you look quite respectable yourself, Mr. Sullivan." Liam had exchanged his trail-worn clothes for a well-cut suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and trim waist. With his dark hair neatly combed and his jawline freshly shaved, he looked more like a successful businessman than the rugged cowboy who had purchased her freedom. They crossed the street and entered the bank, joining the queue of customers waiting for assistance. Eleanor scanned the room discreetly, noting the tellers behind their cages and the more private offices visible through glass-paned doors at the rear of the building. "Can I help you?" a middle-aged clerk asked when they reached the front of the line. "We'd like to speak with someone about investment opportunities," Liam replied smoothly. "My fiancé and I are new to Sacramento, looking to establish ourselves here." "Of course, sir. Mr. Hayes handles most of our investment accounts. If you'll wait a moment, I'll see if he's available." Eleanor's heart quickened at the name, and she felt Liam's hand tighten slightly on her arm. The clerk disappeared into one of the rear offices, returning moments later with a tall, distinguished-looking man in his 50s. "Good morning," the man greeted them with a practiced smile. "I'm Joseph Hayes, investment manager. I understand you're interested in our services." "Liam Sullivan," Liam introduced himself, shaking Hayes's hand firmly. "And my fiancée, Miss Eleanor Simmons. We're hoping to discuss investment options for our future." If the name Simmons meant anything to Hayes, he gave no sign of it. "Pleased to meet you both. Please, come to my office where we can speak more privately." They followed Hayes to a well-appointed office with leather chairs and a large desk covered with neatly arranged papers. A window behind the desk overlooked a small courtyard, providing natural light and a sense of openness. "Now then," Hayes said once they were seated, "what sort of investments were you considering, Mr. Sullivan?" For the next half hour, Liam engaged Hayes in a detailed discussion of banking options, investment opportunities, and interest rates. Eleanor contributed occasionally, playing her role as the interested bride-to-be while carefully observing Hayes for any sign that he recognized her name or any connection to Blackwell. "You mentioned you're new to Sacramento," Hayes said eventually. "What brings you to our fair city, if I may ask?" "I own a cattle ranch north of here," Liam explained. "For years I've been focused on expanding the operation, but now that I'm to be married, I'm looking to diversify my investments and create a more stable future." "Very wise," Hayes nodded approvingly. "Many ranchers neglect financial planning until it's too late. And you, Miss Simmons, are you also new to California?" "No, I grew up in Petaluma," Eleanor replied truthfully. "My father was a merchant there before he passed away recently." "My condolences," Hayes said, his expression appropriately somber. "Was that Edmund Simmons, by chance? I believe I've had some dealings with Petaluma merchants over the years." Eleanor tensed but kept her voice steady. "Yes, that was my father. Did you know him well?" "Not well," Hayes replied, a flicker of something caution perhaps crossing his face. "Business acquaintances only. I was sorry to hear of his passing. I understand it was quite sudden." "Yes," Eleanor said, watching him closely. "Quite unexpected." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken when Hayes cleared his throat and returned to discussing investment options. As the conversation continued, Eleanor became increasingly certain that Hayes was more than just a banker who'd had casual dealings with her father. His questions about Petaluma were too specific, his interest in her father's affairs too pointed. "One last question," Liam said as their meeting drew to a close. "A friend in Petaluma recommended I speak with a business associate of his when I reached Sacramento, a Mr. Blackwell. I believe he mentioned the man had connections to this bank." Hayes's reaction was subtle but unmistakable, a tightening around the eyes, a momentary stillness. "Blackwell," he repeated, his tone carefully neutral. "I'm afraid the name isn't familiar to me, Mr. Sullivan." "Perhaps your friend was mistaken." "Perhaps," Liam agreed pleasantly. "In any case, we've taken enough of your time. Thank you for your expertise, Mr. Hayes." As they rose to leave, Hayes's gaze lingered on Eleanor, a calculating look that made her skin crawl. "Miss Simmons, please accept my condolences again for your father. If you need any assistance settling his affairs, our bank would be happy to help." "That's very kind," Eleanor replied, maintaining her composure with effort, "but my stepmother is handling those matters." "Ah, yes, Mrs. Victoria Simmons, I believe?" Hayes asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Eleanor's breath caught. She had never mentioned Victoria's name. "Yes," she confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. "Do you know her as well?" "Only by reputation," Hayes said smoothly. "Petaluma is a small community after all. Good day to you both." Outside the bank, Eleanor waited until they were well out of earshot before speaking. "He knew Victoria," she said urgently. "I never mentioned her name, but he knew her. And he lied about Blackwell," Liam added grimly. His reaction was unmistakable. "What do we do now?" Eleanor asked, glancing back at the imposing bank building. "We watch and wait," Liam replied. "Hayes is our connection to Blackwell. He'll lead us to him, especially now that he's suspicious." "Suspicious." "We mentioned both your father and Blackwell in the same conversation," Liam explained. "If Hayes is involved in their schemes, he'll be worried about what you might know. He'll contact Blackwell as soon as possible." Eleanor's stomach tightened with a mixture of fear and determination. "So we follow Hayes," Liam confirmed. "But first, let's find somewhere to observe the bank without being seen." They found a small cafe across the street with a clear view of the bank's entrance. Over cups of strong coffee, they watched the comings and goings, alert for any sign of Hayes leaving the building. "Tell me more about your brother," Eleanor said during their vigil, wanting to understand more about the tragedy that had set Liam on this path. Liam's expression softened with old grief. "Thomas was 4 years younger than me, always laughing, always finding the good in people. He met Catherine at a harvest dance in Oregon. They were married within 3 months, couldn't bear to be apart," they said. "They sound like they were very much in love," Eleanor observed gently. "They were," Liam confirmed. "Which made what happened all the more tragic. Thomas was so happy when Catherine told him about the baby. They had so many plans." He fell silent, his gaze fixed on the bank entrance but his mind clearly elsewhere. Eleanor resisted the urge to reach for his hand, uncertain if the gesture would be welcome. "There he is," Liam said suddenly, straightening in his chair. Hayes had emerged from the bank, moving with purposeful strides down the street. Without a word, Liam left money for their coffee and they followed, maintaining a discreet distance. Hayes led them on a winding path through Sacramento's business district, eventually entering a building that housed a telegraph office. He emerged 15 minutes later, looking more relaxed, and returned to the bank. "He sent a message," Liam said as they watched Hayes disappear inside the bank. "Probably to Blackwell." "Now what?" Eleanor asked. "Now we go to the telegraph office and see if we can find out what the message said and where it was sent." Inside the telegraph office, Liam approached the clerk with an easy smile. "Good morning. My brother was supposed to wire me about an urgent family matter. Sullivan's the name. Has anything arrived?" The clerk checked his records and shook his head. "Nothing for Sullivan, sir." "That's strange," Liam frowned convincingly. "I just saw Joseph Hayes from the Sacramento bank leave here. He's a friend of my brother's. Perhaps the message came under his name by mistake." The young clerk looked uncertain. "I'm not supposed to discuss other customers' business, sir." Liam leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I understand your position, but this is a family emergency. My mother is gravely ill, and I need to know if I should return home immediately." The clerk hesitated, then relented. "Mr. Hayes didn't receive a telegram, sir. He sent one to Virginia City, Nevada." "Virginia City," Liam repeated, exchanging a significant look with Eleanor. "Thank you. You've been most helpful." Outside, Liam's expression was grim but determined. "Blackwell's in Virginia City. It's a major mining town in Nevada, about a day's journey from here." "Then that's where we'll go," Eleanor said without hesitation. Liam studied her face for a long moment. "Eleanor, I want you to consider staying in Sacramento. I could wire the sheriff in Virginia City, have him meet me there." "No," Eleanor interrupted firmly. "I'm coming with you, Liam. We've come this far together. We'll see it through together." A complex emotion flickered across Liam's face, concern mingled with something that might have been admiration or even tenderness. "All right," he agreed finally. "We'll leave tomorrow morning." The Central Pacific runs all the way to Virginia City. Now it's faster than a stagecoach and more comfortable. As they walked back toward their hotel, Eleanor was struck by the realization that for the first time in her life, she was making her own decisions, charting her own course. The circumstances were far from what she would have chosen, but there was a fierce joy in this newfound independence. And if part of that joy came from the man walking beside her, his presence solid and reassuring in a world that had turned upside down, well, that was something she would examine later, when Blackwell was caught and justice had been served. Virginia City rose from the barren slopes of Mount Davidson like a defiant statement against nature itself, a sprawling, bustling testament to human greed and determination. As the train pulled into the station, Eleanor gazed out the window at a landscape utterly different from the fertile valleys of California. Here, the earth had been carved and blasted in man's relentless hunt for silver, leaving scars visible for miles around. "It's so raw," she murmured as Liam helped her down from the train. "Virginia City is a mining town in its prime," Liam explained, guiding her through the crowded platform. "The Comstock Lode has made it one of the richest cities in America. Every fortune hunter, gambler, and opportunist from here to the Mississippi has come looking for their share." The streets were a chaotic mix of elegant brick buildings and hastily constructed wooden structures. Well-dressed businessmen shared the boardwalks with rough-looking miners, while fancy carriages navigated around ore wagons on the dusty streets. "Where do we start looking for Blackwell?" Eleanor asked, staying close to Liam's side as they made their way toward a hotel on C Street, the main thoroughfare. "Hayes's telegram went to the International Hotel," Liam replied. "We'll start there, but carefully. If Blackwell is expecting trouble, he'll be watching for strangers asking questions." The International Hotel was Virginia City's finest establishment, a 4-story structure with elaborate furnishings and uniformed staff. After securing rooms, they sat in the dining room, strategically positioned to observe the lobby. "This seems different from your usual accommodations when tracking a criminal," Eleanor commented, noting the elegant surroundings. Liam's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Usually I'm sleeping under the stars or in livery stables, but Blackwell has expensive tastes. He gravitates toward luxury. If he's in Virginia City, he'll either be staying here or spending time in places like this." As they ate, Liam outlined his plan. They would spend the afternoon casually exploring Virginia City saloons and gambling houses, places where a man like Blackwell might conduct business. Eleanor would pose as Liam's wife, allowing her to accompany him without raising eyebrows. "Most of these establishments allow respectable women in certain areas," Liam explained, "especially those catering to the mine owners and investors rather than just the miners." "And if we find him?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety fluttering in her stomach. "We alert the local sheriff," Liam said firmly. "No confrontations, no risks. Blackwell is too dangerous for anything else." Eleanor nodded, though she wondered if Liam would truly be able to restrain himself when faced with his brother's killer. The pain she'd glimpsed in his eyes when he spoke of Thomas suggested a wound that had never fully healed. They spent the afternoon moving through Virginia City's more respectable establishments, the Washoe Club, where mining magnates gathered to discuss business, the Delta Saloon, famous for its ornate suicide table, where legend said 3 owners had lost everything and taken their own lives, and several smaller gambling houses along C Street. Everywhere they went, Liam casually mentioned he was looking to invest in mining interests, dropping the names of actual mine owners he'd researched on the train journey. Eleanor played her part as the supportive wife, listening attentively to conversations while appearing to focus on her tea or lemonade. By early evening, they had covered most of the major establishments without any sign of Blackwell. Tired and discouraged, they returned to the International for dinner. "Perhaps he's using another name," Eleanor suggested as they waited for their meal, or staying somewhere else entirely. It's possible, Liam acknowledged. But Hayes's telegram came here, and he stopped abruptly, his gaze fixed on something over Eleanor's shoulder. His expression didn't change, but Eleanor saw his hand tighten around his water glass. "Don't turn around," he said quietly. "Blackwell just walked in with 2 other men." Eleanor's heart lurched. "Are you certain it's him?" "Positive," Liam confirmed, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of tension. "He's heading for the dining room." Eleanor fought the urge to look behind her. "What do we do?" "Continue eating normally," Liam instructed. "I'll try to see where they're seated. With luck, they won't recognize me." When their food arrived, Liam used the distraction to casually survey the room. "They're at a table near the back," he reported. "Blackwell has his back to us, but his companions are facing this way." "Do they look like miners or businessmen?" Eleanor asked, cutting her steak with deliberate movements. "Businessmen," Liam replied. "Expensive suits, watch chains. One of them looks familiar, though I can't place him." They ate slowly, Liam maintaining a stream of casual conversation while keeping the table in his peripheral vision. Eleanor was amazed at his ability to appear completely at ease while every sense was clearly alert for danger. "They're leaving," Liam murmured eventually. "Looks like they're heading for the hotel bar." As the men passed their table, Eleanor kept her head down, ostensibly focused on her dessert. From beneath her lashes, she caught a glimpse of a familiar profile: Raymond Blackwell, the man who had helped poison her father, looking prosperous and carefree as he laughed at something one of his companions said. A surge of anger rose in her chest, so powerful it momentarily took her breath away. This man had destroyed her family, had stolen her father's life, and here he was, enjoying the fruits of his crimes without a hint of remorse. "Eleanor," Liam's voice, low and concerned, brought her back to herself. "Are you all right?" She realized her knuckles were white around her fork. With effort, she relaxed her grip. "I'm fine," she said, though they both knew it was a lie. "We should go upstairs," Liam suggested. "We need to plan our next move." In the privacy of Eleanor's room, they discussed their options. The presence of the other men complicated matters. They couldn't simply approach the local sheriff without risking Blackwell being warned by his associates. "I recognize one of them now," Liam said, pacing the small space. "Martin Combs, he's on the Virginia City Council. If Blackwell has connections that high up, we need to be even more careful." "What if we followed him?" Eleanor suggested. "Find out where he's staying, what his routine is, then we could approach the sheriff with a specific time and place to arrest him." Liam considered this. "It's risky, but it might be our best option. Blackwell doesn't know you're in Virginia City, and he's only seen me once, years ago, as long as we're careful." A knock at the door interrupted their planning. They exchanged alarmed glances. No one should know they were here, at least not together. Liam moved silently to position himself beside the door, hand moving toward the gun he wore concealed under his jacket. "Who is it?" Eleanor called, her voice surprisingly steady. "Message for Mrs. Sullivan," came the reply, a hotel employee, from the sound of it. Liam nodded for Eleanor to open the door while he remained out of sight. She did so cautiously, finding a uniformed bellboy holding a folded note. "Thank you," she said, accepting the note and closing the door quickly. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the paper. The message, written in an elegant hand, was brief but chilling. "My dear Miss Simmons," or is it Mrs. Sullivan now? "How unexpected to find Edmund's daughter in Virginia City. I suggest a private conversation before things become complicated. The Silver Queen Saloon, 9 o'clock. Come alone, or I'll be forced to share certain information about your husband with the local authorities. They're quite interested in vigilante justice here. R.B." Liam's face darkened as he read the note over her shoulder. "He knows we're here," he said grimly, "and he knows who I am." "How?" Eleanor asked, shaken by this development. "Hayes must have recognized me in Sacramento," Liam concluded. "My pursuit of Blackwell hasn't exactly been secret in certain circles. He probably telegraphed a description along with the warning." Eleanor read the note again, her mind racing. "He wants me to meet him alone, which you absolutely will not do," Liam stated flatly. "This is a trap, Eleanor, either to capture you as leverage against me or—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Eleanor understood the implied threat. Blackwell had already killed her father. He wouldn't hesitate to eliminate her if she posed a threat. We need to leave Virginia City, Liam decided, checking his pocket watch. There's a train to Sacramento at midnight. We'll be on it. And let Blackwell escape again, Eleanor challenged. No. This is our chance, Liam. He doesn't know that we have evidence against him. Victoria's testimony, my father's letter. He thinks this is just about your pursuit of him. It's too dangerous, Liam insisted. What if I did meet him? Eleanor suggested, an idea forming. Not alone, of course. But if you were nearby, hidden, and we alerted the sheriff beforehand. Liam was already shaking his head. Absolutely not. I won't use you as bait. It's not using me as bait if I volunteer, Eleanor argued, and it might be our only chance to catch him. If we leave now, he'll disappear again, and who knows how many more people he'll hurt before you find another lead. Liam's jaw tightened, conflict evident in his expression. Eleanor, if anything happened to you. Something in his voice, in the intensity of his gaze, made Eleanor's heart skip. Nothing will happen, she assured him softly, not if we plan carefully. For a long moment they stared at each other, a silent battle of wills. Finally, Liam sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. If we do this, we do it my way, he stipulated. We go to the sheriff first, explain everything. We set up a proper trap with lawmen positioned to intervene the moment Blackwell shows his true colors. Agreed, Eleanor said quickly, before he could change his mind. And you wear this, Liam added, reaching into his jacket and removing a small Derringer pistol. It's not much, but at close range, it's effective. Eleanor took the weapon gingerly. It was smaller than she'd expected, easily concealed in a pocket or reticule. I've never fired a gun, she admitted. It's simple, Liam said, showing her how to cock the hammer and pull the trigger. But it's a last resort, understand. If anything goes wrong, you get out of there. Don't try to be brave. The irony of this statement wasn't lost on Eleanor. Here she was, planning to meet a known killer, and Liam was warning her not to be brave. But she nodded her agreement, recognizing the concern behind his instructions. As they worked out the details of their plan, Eleanor tried to ignore the fluttering in her stomach, not just fear of the coming confrontation, but a growing awareness of how much Liam's opinion and safety mattered to her. Somehow, in the space of a few days, this man had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated, and judging by the protective intensity in his eyes as he explained how to use the Derringer, perhaps she had become important to him as well. The Silver Queen Saloon glittered with gaslight and gilt mirrors, a palace of vice catering to Virginia City's wealthier citizens. Despite its opulence, an undercurrent of danger ran through the establishment, a reminder that fortunes were won and lost here nightly, and not everyone accepted their losses with grace. Eleanor entered alone at precisely 9 o'clock, her heart pounding beneath the calm exterior she fought to maintain. She wore a simple but elegant blue dress borrowed from Mrs. Hargrove's package, her hair arranged in a sophisticated style that made her look older than her 19 years. The Derringer was tucked into a hidden pocket sewn into her skirt, accessible but concealed. Sheriff Randall and 2 deputies were already inside, positioned strategically around the main room, appearing to be ordinary patrons enjoying an evening drink. Liam had reluctantly agreed to remain outside with another deputy, watching the back exit in case Blackwell attempted to flee. A hostess approached as Eleanor hesitated just inside the entrance. "May I help you, madam? I'm meeting someone," Eleanor replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Mr. Blackwell." Recognition flickered in the woman's eyes. "Of course. Mr. Blackwell is expecting you in the private dining room upstairs. Follow me, please." Eleanor's stomach tightened with apprehension. The plan had been for her to meet Blackwell in the main saloon area, where the sheriff and deputies could easily intervene. A private room upstairs complicated matters significantly. As she followed the hostess up a carpeted staircase, Eleanor cast a quick glance over her shoulder. Sheriff Randall caught her eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod, indicating he'd noted the change in venue. Whether he could adjust their strategy quickly enough remained to be seen. The hostess led her to a door at the end of a short hallway, knocked once, and then departed without another word. After a deep breath to steady herself, Eleanor entered. Raymond Blackwell sat alone at a table set for two, a bottle of champagne chilling in a silver bucket beside him. He rose as she entered, a smile that didn't reach his eyes spreading across his handsome face. "Miss Simmons," he greeted her, gesturing to the chair across from him. "How lovely to see you again. Please join me." Eleanor moved further into the room, noting with dismay that there were no other exits besides the door she just entered. The windows overlooked C Street, 3 stories above the ground, no escape route there. "Mr. Blackwell," she acknowledged, taking the offered seat. "I must admit, your invitation was unexpected. As was your presence in Virginia City," he countered smoothly, pouring champagne into 2 crystal flutes. "Especially in the company of Liam Sullivan, a man with a rather obsessive interest in my affairs." "Perhaps his interest is justified," Eleanor replied, leaving her champagne untouched. Blackwell chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. "Direct like your father. I appreciated that about Edmund Wright until the end." Anger flared in Eleanor's chest, but she tamped it down. "Is that why you poisoned him? Because you appreciated him? So you know about that," Blackwell said, his expression unchanged despite the accusation. "I wondered how much Victoria might have revealed under pressure. She was always the weak link, too emotional, too greedy." "She confessed everything," Eleanor informed him, watching his reaction carefully. "About the poison, about your partnership, about the embezzlement. The sheriff in Petaluma has her full statement." Blackwell took a leisurely sip of champagne, appearing unperturbed by this news. "A statement from a desperate woman trying to save herself, hardly conclusive evidence." "My father kept records," Eleanor countered, "and he wrote a letter before he died, naming you and Victoria." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Blackwell's face. "A convenient claim, but difficult to prove, I imagine." "The letter is in the hands of the Sacramento authorities," Eleanor lied smoothly, "along with the financial records showing the money you stole. It's over, Mr. Blackwell. I came here tonight to see the man who murdered my father before he faces justice." Blackwell's pleasant demeanor fell away, his eyes hardening to chips of ice. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Simmons. Did Sullivan put you up to this? Convince you to confront me while he hides in the shadows?" "Liam doesn't know I'm here," Eleanor said, sticking to their agreed story. "I left him a note saying I needed time to think. He's probably still waiting at the International Hotel." "A touching display of independence," Blackwell remarked skeptically. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "Let me tell you what's actually going to happen, Miss Simmons. You're going to accompany me out of Virginia City tonight. We'll take the midnight train east. You'll write a letter to your cowboy, telling him you've decided to start a new life elsewhere." Eleanor's blood ran cold at his matter-of-fact tone. "And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't," Blackwell replied, "I'll ensure that Mr. Sullivan meets the same fate as his brother. And this time, I'll make sure he suffers before the end." Eleanor's hand moved imperceptibly toward her concealed derringer. "You're admitting to Thomas Sullivan's murder as well?" Blackwell smiled thinly. "Thomas was unfortunate, too curious for his own good, much like your father. Some men simply can't leave well enough alone." "And what happens to me once we leave Virginia City?" Eleanor asked, though she already knew the answer. "That depends entirely on your cooperation," Blackwell said, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "You're a beautiful woman, Eleanor. I could be persuaded to be generous." Eleanor fought to keep her revulsion from showing on her face. "And if I refuse," Blackwell's smile vanished, "then this conversation ends quite differently." His hand moved to his jacket, where Eleanor had no doubt a weapon was concealed. "Now, shall we dispense with this charade? Your decision, Miss Simmons, leave with me willingly, or leave in a manner much less comfortable for you." Eleanor knew she had to act quickly. Blackwell was clearly losing patience, and there was no sign of Sheriff Randall or his deputies. The plan was unraveling rapidly. "I'll need a moment to consider," she said, feigning uncertainty. "This is all happening so quickly." "You have until I finish this glass," Blackwell replied, raising his champagne in a mocking toast. "Choose wisely." Eleanor glanced toward the window as if contemplating escape, then back at the door. She needed to get Blackwell to incriminate himself further, to buy time for the sheriff to realize something had gone wrong. "Before I decide," she said, leaning forward slightly, "I want to know something. Did my father suffer at the end? Did he know what you and Victoria had done?" Blackwell's lips curved in a cruel smile. "He figured it out too late, much like you have. Yes, he knew. Victoria rather enjoyed telling him on his deathbed after he changed his will, of course, the look in his eyes." He chuckled. "That's the moment I truly savor in these arrangements, when they realize they've been betrayed by those they trusted most. Like you betrayed Catherine Sullivan after you murdered her husband," Eleanor pressed, anger momentarily overwhelming caution. Blackwell's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You know too much for your own good, Miss Simmons. I see Sullivan has been quite thorough in his investigations." "Thorough enough to know you're responsible for at least 3 deaths," Eleanor replied, her hand now resting on the concealed pocket containing the derringer. "My father, Thomas Sullivan, and Catherine's father. 4, actually," Blackwell corrected with disturbing casualness. "Catherine herself was becoming problematic. A tragic accident on the stairs grief can make one so careless." Eleanor couldn't hide her shock at this revelation. "You monster," she whispered. Blackwell drained his champagne and set the glass down with deliberate precision. "Time's up, Miss Simmons. Your decision." Before Eleanor could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway outside, raised voices, the sound of a scuffle. Blackwell was on his feet instantly, drawing a revolver from inside his jacket and moving toward Eleanor. "It seems your cowboy found you after all," he snarled, grabbing her arm and yanking her to her feet. "A pity. I would have made your end quick and painless." The door burst open to reveal not the sheriff but Liam, his own gun drawn and a fierce determination in his eyes. "Let her go, Blackwell," he commanded, his voice deadly calm. "Sullivan," Blackwell acknowledged with a twisted smile, "I've been expecting you for years." "Always one step behind, weren't you?" Eleanor could feel Blackwell's gun pressed against her side, his grip on her arm painfully tight. Liam's gaze met hers briefly, a silent question in his eyes. She gave an almost imperceptible nod, understanding passing between them. "It's over," Liam said, keeping his gun trained on Blackwell. "The sheriff and his men are downstairs. There's no way out." "There's always a way out," Blackwell countered. "And Miss Simmons is going to help me find it. Lower your weapons, Sullivan, or she dies right now." Eleanor knew this was her moment. With Blackwell's attention fixed on Liam, she slipped her hand into her pocket, fingers closing around the derringer. In one fluid motion, she brought it out and pressed it against Blackwell's side, mirroring his own threat. "I think not, Mr. Blackwell," she said steadily. Surprise flickered across Blackwell's face, followed by a calculating look. "You won't pull that trigger, Miss Simmons. You don't have it in you." "For my father, for Thomas Sullivan, for Catherine," Eleanor said, her voice unwavering. "I have it in me." A tense silence fell, the 3 of them locked in a deadly tableau. Then Blackwell laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Well played," he conceded. "But let me ask you this, can you pull that trigger faster than I can pull mine?" "She doesn't have to," came a new voice from the doorway. Sheriff Randall stepped into the room, his revolver adding a third threat to Blackwell's predicament. "Drop your weapon, Blackwell. It's finished." For a moment, Eleanor thought Blackwell would choose death over surrender. His grip on her tightened, and she could feel the tension in his body, like a coiled spring ready to release. Then, with a fluid movement that caught everyone by surprise, Blackwell shoved Eleanor hard toward Liam and lunged for the window. Glass shattered as he crashed through, choosing the 3-story fall rather than face justice for his crimes. Liam caught Eleanor as she stumbled forward, steadying her with strong hands before rushing to the broken window with the sheriff. Eleanor followed, heart pounding. Below, a crowd was already gathering around Blackwell's crumpled form on the boardwalk. Even from this height, it was clear from the unnatural angle of his body that Raymond Blackwell would never hurt anyone again. "Are you all right?" Liam asked urgently, turning back to Eleanor, his eyes scanning her for any sign of injury. "I'm fine," she assured him, though her knees felt suddenly weak as the danger passed and reaction set in. "He didn't hurt me." Liam's relief was palpable. He reached for her hand, carefully taking the derringer she still clutched and tucking it away. "You were incredible," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, and incredibly foolish. When I realized he'd taken you upstairs instead of meeting in the main room. What happened to the plan? Eleanor asked, glancing at Sheriff Randall, who was speaking with a deputy who had just arrived. Blackwell's friends on the city council, Liam explained grimly. They delayed the sheriff with a supposed emergency. By the time he realized it was a diversion, you were already upstairs. I couldn't wait any longer. The realization of how close she had come to disaster washed over Eleanor. If Liam hadn't arrived when he did, if she hadn't had the Derringer. It's over now, she said, as much to reassure herself as Liam. Truly over. Sheriff Randall approached them, his weathered face grave. Blackwell's dead, he confirmed. Broke his neck in the fall. I'll need statements from both of you about what happened here. Of course, Liam agreed, and there's more to tell you, Sheriff. About murders in Oregon and California, and likely others we don't know about yet. As they followed the sheriff downstairs, Eleanor's hand found Liam's, their fingers interlacing naturally. He glanced down at her, a question in his eyes that had nothing to do with Blackwell or the night's events. Later, she whispered, and felt his fingers tighten around hers in understanding. There would be time later, now that Blackwell was gone and justice had been served. Time to explore the feelings that had grown between them during this dangerous journey. Time to decide what came next. For the first time since her father's death, Eleanor felt the weight of grief and fear lifting. The future, once so bleak and constrained, now stretched before her filled with possibilities, and the most intriguing possibility of all was the man whose hand held hers so securely as they descended the stairs. The sun was rising over the eastern mountains when Liam and Eleanor finally left the sheriff's office. They had spent hours giving their statements, explaining the entire sequence of events from Edmund Simmons' murder to Blackwell's final moments. Sheriff Randall had telegraphed both Petaluma and Sacramento, confirming Victoria's arrest and initiating investigations into Hayes's involvement with Blackwell's schemes. The sheriff says they'll need you to testify against Hayes when the time comes, Liam said as they walked slowly back toward the International Hotel. And possibly against Victoria as well, though her confession may make that unnecessary. Eleanor nodded, exhaustion evident in her face but a sense of peace in her eyes. I'll do whatever is needed. For my father, for your brother and his wife, for all of Blackwell's victims. They walked in companionable silence for a while, the streets of Virginia City quiet in the early morning hours. Finally, Liam spoke, his voice tentative in a way Eleanor hadn't heard before. What will you do now? He asked. Return to Petaluma, Eleanor considered the question. There's nothing for me in Petaluma anymore. The house will likely be sold to pay any remaining debts once Victoria's trial is concluded. I suppose I could go to San Francisco, perhaps find a teaching position as I'd once hoped. Liam nodded, his expression carefully neutral. San Francisco is a fine city, growing rapidly, plenty of opportunities for someone with your intelligence and courage. And you? Eleanor asked, her heart beating faster for reasons that had nothing to do with their night's adventure. Will you return to your ranch? Yes, Liam confirmed, a genuine smile touching his lips for the first time since Blackwell had fallen. It's been too long. Thomas would have wanted me to live my life, not spend years consumed by vengeance. They had reached the hotel, but neither seemed eager to go inside. Instead, Liam guided Eleanor to a small bench nearby where they could watch the city coming to life as the sun rose higher. Eleanor, Liam began, then paused, uncharacteristically hesitant. These past few days have been extraordinary. Under any other circumstances, we might never have met. An auction block is hardly the conventional way to make an acquaintance, Eleanor agreed with a small smile. No, Liam acknowledged, returning her smile briefly before growing serious again. But I've come to know you in ways that might have taken months or years under normal conditions. Your courage, your intelligence, your compassion, even your stubbornness. Eleanor raised an eyebrow at this last attribute but didn't interrupt. What I'm trying to say, Liam continued, is that I find myself reluctant to say goodbye. Eleanor's breath caught. I feel the same way, she admitted softly. Liam took her hands in his storm-gray eyes intent on hers. I'm not offering you another auction, Eleanor. I'm not trying to buy your future or dictate your choices, but I am asking if you might consider a different path than San Francisco. What path would that be? Eleanor asked, though she thought she already knew the answer, could see it in the warmth of his gaze. My ranch needs a mistress, Liam said simply. And I find myself in need of a partner, someone to share my life with, to build a future with. Someone whose strength complements my own. Eleanor felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. Liam Sullivan, are you proposing to me after less than a week's acquaintance? I am, he confirmed without hesitation, though I'll understand if you need time to consider. As I promised from the beginning, the choice is entirely yours. Eleanor thought about the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment, from the humiliation of being sold to the highest bidder, to finding justice for her father, to this unexpected offer of a future she hadn't dared to imagine. I don't need time, she said, her voice steady and sure. My answer is yes. The joy that transformed Liam's face was something Eleanor knew she would remember for the rest of her life. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a fervent kiss to her fingers. You've made me the happiest of men, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You gave me a choice when no one else would, Eleanor replied softly. You helped me find justice for my father, and somewhere along the way you found your way into my heart. Liam leaned forward, his gaze dropping to her lips in silent question. Eleanor closed the distance between them, her heart soaring as their lips met in a tender, promising kiss, their first, but certainly not their last. When they finally parted, Liam kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. We'll take the train back to Sacramento tomorrow, he said, and from there to the ranch. It's not grand, but it's beautiful country, Eleanor. I think you'll love it. If you're there, I know I will, she replied honestly. As the sun climbed higher over Virginia City, Eleanor Simmons, soon to be Eleanor Sullivan, felt the final pieces of her old life falling away. Ahead lay a future she had chosen freely, with a man who respected her strength and cherished her heart. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for when she stood trembling on that auction platform just days ago. 5 years later, Eleanor stood on the wide porch of the Sullivan ranch house, watching as Liam taught their 3-year-old son Edmund to sit on his first pony. The little boy's delighted laughter carried across the sun-drenched meadow, a sound that never failed to make Eleanor's heart swell with joy. Not too fast, Liam, she called, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly where their second child grew. Remember what happened last time. Liam grinned up at her, his storm-gray eyes twinkling with mischief. That was entirely the pony's fault, not mine, he protested, though he did slow the gentle circuit he was making. Their ranch had flourished in the 5 years since their return from Virginia City. Under Liam's careful management, and with Eleanor's sharp business sense, they had expanded their holdings and improved their breeding stock. The humble ranch Liam had described had transformed into one of the most prosperous in the region, a testament to their partnership in all things. Eleanor had found her place here more easily than she'd expected. The open spaces and honest work suited her independent spirit, and she discovered a talent for breeding horses that complemented Liam's cattle expertise. She'd also established a small school for the children of their ranch hands and neighboring homesteaders, fulfilling her dream of teaching while building community in this remote corner of California. News had reached them over the years about the aftermath of Blackwell's death. Joseph Hayes had been convicted of fraud and conspiracy, his testimony revealing the full extent of Blackwell's criminal network. Victoria had received a lesser sentence for her cooperation, but would remain imprisoned for many years to come. The Simmons house in Petaluma had been sold, the proceeds distributed to Edmund's creditors, with a small remainder that had gone toward establishing the school on Sullivan land. As Eleanor watched her husband and son, she reflected on the strange, twisted path that had brought her here. Had Victoria not sold her at auction, had Liam not been tracking Blackwell, had they not found the courage to trust each other during those dangerous days, none of this happiness would exist. "Mama, look," Edmund called excitedly as Liam led the pony toward the house. "I'm riding like Papa." "I see you, my brave boy," Eleanor replied, descending the porch steps carefully to meet them. "You're a natural horseman." Liam lifted Edmund from the pony's back and set him on the ground, where he immediately ran to wrap his arms around Eleanor's legs. She ruffled his dark hair, so like his father's, while Liam tied the pony to the hitching post. "And how are you feeling today?" Liam asked, coming to place a gentle hand on her belly. "Any signs that this little one is ready to join us?" "Not yet," Eleanor assured him. "Though Dr. Morgan says it could be any day now." Liam's expression softened as he looked at her, the love in his eyes as strong as it had been on their wedding day. "You are the most beautiful sight I've ever seen," he said, bending to kiss her softly, "even when I'm as round as a harvest moon." Eleanor teased, though she leaned into his kiss happily. "Especially then," Liam affirmed. "Though I think after this one we might give you a rest for a while." Eleanor laughed, a sound of pure contentment. "We'll see what happens," she said with a meaningful smile that made Liam's eyes darken with promise. Later that evening, with Edmund tucked into bed and the ranch house quiet except for the occasional distant lowing of cattle, Eleanor and Liam sat together on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the vast California sky. Her head rested on his shoulder, his arm wrapped securely around her. "I was thinking about the auction today," Eleanor said softly. "How different everything might have been if you hadn't been there." Liam's arm tightened around her. "I try not to think about that," he admitted. "The idea of you being sold to Johnson or any of those other men." "But you were there," Eleanor reminded him. "You outbid them all, not to own me, but to give me a choice." "Best $1,000 I ever spent," Liam said with a smile in his voice, "though I'm still not sure I deserve to be the one you chose." Eleanor lifted her head to look at him in the moonlight. Even after 5 years of marriage, the sight of his face still made her heart beat faster. "You were always my choice, Liam Sullivan. From the moment you helped me down from that auction platform with more kindness than I'd seen in months." "And you were mine," he replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face with tender fingers. "My brave, beautiful Eleanor, the woman who faced down a murderer with nothing but a Derringer and her own courage." "We faced him together," Eleanor corrected, "just as we've faced everything since." As if in agreement, the baby kicked vigorously, making both of them laugh as Liam felt the movement under his hand. "Another strong-willed Sullivan in the making," he commented with paternal pride. "Heaven help us if this one inherits both our stubborn streaks," Eleanor said wryly. They fell silent again, content in each other's company as the night deepened around them. Eleanor thought about the journey that had brought them here, the grief and danger that had ultimately led to this profound happiness. From auction block to altar, from vengeance to forgiveness, from uncertainty to this steadfast love. "I love you, Liam," she murmured, nestling closer to his warmth. "And I love you, Eleanor," he replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "More than I could ever say." In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the haunting sound echoing across the valley that was now their home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and joys, but tonight, surrounded by the peace they had fought so hard to achieve, Eleanor and Liam Sullivan held each other close, grateful for the second chance at happiness that had begun with a desperate bid at an auction that had changed both their lives forever.